thought maybe the first thing we could talk about is things that people can do for themselves to improve their health that cost absolutely no money whatsoever. So would you be able to talk on that subject for us?
Sure.
Great.
If anybody finds that whatever health problem they might have gets worse in winter, then you'd be pretty sure it's a vitamin D deficiency from lack of sun. You know, why do people get colds in the winter? Well, it's usually lack of sunshine. So when I realized this some 15 years ago, I used to get a couple of colds every year. Then I started supplementing with vitamin D just in winter, if I wasn't getting any sunshine. And I never got a cold again in the last 15 years, never had one since. That was all it was. You know, for some people, they get, you know, SAD, you know, seasonal affective disorder. And it's amazing how powerful vitamin D is, and it's so cheap. I mean, a year's supply is 20 quid, you know, so it's not going to break the bank. Mm-hmm. And the figures are something like the people with the highest vitamin D have something like 70% less cancer. Just that one thing alone is massive, right across the board of health. So other things, maybe 50% of the population are dehydrated, maybe. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty massive. You know, your brain's made mainly of water, your eyes are made mainly of water. So dehydration really is an issue for a lot of people. But then, you know, people say, well, the water tastes horrible. Well, you really have to filter water these days. You know, water has become a fairly dangerous substance. What else can you do for free? Well, stuff you can do for almost free is a decision, and that decision is, well, let me give you one of my favorite examples. Let's say there's a knock at the door, and you open the door, and there's this beautiful woman carrying a 1-year-old riding a racehorse. And she says, look, I'm really sorry about this, but I've got to do something urgently. Would you mind looking after the racehorse? By the way, the racehorse is worth £20 million. And would you mind looking after the baby? And she's got to do this urgent thing, right? So what are you going to feed the baby and the horse? Well, we might decide that the only thing we've got in the house is oats, and probably the baby and the horse might eat the oats, okay? So how much poison are you going to give the baby? How much poison are you going to add to the oats for the horse? I mean, the answer obviously clearly is none. Mm-hmm. But the problem is that if you are eating steel milled oats from the supermarket that's not organic, it's poisoned. It's poisoned in 2 ways, maybe more. You know, if it's not organic, then the soil will be poisoned, and the insects and all the life under the soil will be almost dead. So there's nothing to produce more minerals. So when harvest time comes, they harvest the grain. What used to happen was they'd then set fire to the field when the stubble was dry and burn it to the ground. Now, you can burn minerals and they're unaffected by it. So every year they burn the stubble down, whether it's oats or wheat or whatever, and they'd remineralize the soil. But back to the baby and the horse. So it is clear that we wouldn't poison a fictitious baby or a fictitious racehorse. We just wouldn't do it. So we have to take a decision to stop poisoning the children, stop poisoning granny, stop poisoning mum, stop poisoning ourselves. We just have to stop supporting an agricultural disaster that is agriculture these days. You know, what's going on is terrible. Now, people say, oh, but organic food is so much more expensive. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. The difference between a loaf of bread and an organic loaf of bread might only be 20p or something. The difference between organic milk and not is, again, a relatively small amount. You know, clearly some things are massively more expensive. I mean, chickens, for example. You can buy a chicken for, let's say, $3.99, or you could buy one for $9.99 or $13.99, wherever you're shopping, for one that's real. So why is one $3.99 and one's $9.99? Well, one of them has been bred hopefully reasonably properly and one hasn't. I mean, it used to take many, many months for a chicken to grow to the size that you'd want to eat it. But these days, they've scaled that right down to about 12 weeks from start to finish. And doing that, they've changed chickens. the food that they're giving chickens is not what a chicken would eat in the wild. Yeah, so things have changed so much in the last 5 years, food-wise, in the last 10 years, in the last 50, in the last 100, in the last 150. I mean, back in 1850, they keep records of births and deaths. They've done for a long time. In the city of Boston, in America, 3 people had heart problems, and nobody had cancer. Type 2 diabetes, fibromyalgia hadn't been thought of yet. There were basically no illnesses, essentially. Then, in 1891, they introduced the first cooking oil. People at that point would have used butter or lard or dripping or whatever it was. And they introduced a processed oil, and immediately heart attacks and cancer and so on started happening. And it just went downhill onwards from there.